Hi everybody, this is Stephen Pugh, the City and Guilds Woodwork course. This is for level 3 students. It's video number 56, and we're talking today about other items of documentation that's found on site. One of the things that you'll often find on site, let me use my little chart to describe these things for you. One of the things that we often find on site is what's called manufacturer's instructions. Now, manufacturer's instructions are very important things. I mean, a lot of people don't bother reading the instructions from manufacturers, but if you've got a new type of tool, or maybe you've just got a new example of an existing tool, you might find that the manufacturer has put a new section into the instructions that you may not be aware of to tell you about a new feature, or to tell you about a different way in which it can be operated, or different safety features or different dangers in using it. So, for example, let me give you a simple example. You might have some information on the back of a tin of paint showing the different drying times, the types of solvents required for cleaning the brushes, etc. Now, if you're always used to using white spirit and then you suddenly discover that you're using a water-based paint, then you're not going to be able to use it in exactly the same way. They're quite different paints. You might have a saw, and on that saw you might be very familiar with the saw, you might be familiar with its use, but there may be added features to that saw, or there may be dangers that have only just been described and only just have been discovered. So this is why it's important to read the manufacturer's instructions. Sometimes you'll have a manual for some powered equipment such as a mixer or a chop saw, and sometimes the information will be new. So that's why it's important to look at the manufacturer's instructions. Now, I put another little word in here, the warranty. Now, a lot of manufacturers will guarantee that the things that they're supplying are good, and that they're good for their purpose, and that they work, and there's a certain amount of guarantee on the quality of the thing that's provided. However, that guarantee may be subject to the fact that that the things are used in the proper way. Okay, and if you use a tool incorrectly, or if you don't use it for the proper purpose, or if you use paint, or you use thinners, or you use all sorts of items that come from manufacturers, if you use them incorrectly, you might discover that the warranty is not there. Okay, so just like with a new car, if you buy a new car and you do something silly with it, you may find that it's not covered by the warranty. So it's very important then that you familiarize yourself with manufacturer's instructions. Don't just automatically throw away manufacturer's instructions. It's always worth the time to read what the manufacturer has to say. If he says nothing new, that's okay. But if he says something that's new, some information that you really need to know about, then it's never going to be a waste of time. Don't forget, it's always good to take the time to sharpen your axe, as they say, and that's always going to save you time in the long run. Now, there are other documents on site. For example, we have what's called minutes. Now, minutes are the record, a brief record of meetings that normally follow certain process. They follow a certain process. So somebody in the meeting needs to have a piece of paper and to record what's being said. First of all, they'll record the time and the date and the place of the meeting. They will list the people who are present, and then they may list the people who are not there, just for the sake of knowing who's not there. Then what will happen in the minutes in a meeting is that the minutes or the notes of the previous meeting will be read out, and everybody has an opportunity to agree that those are the notes of the previous meeting. And normally the group will vote to say yes, that's correct, and people will nominate somebody to say yes, that's correct. And then the next thing is there will be each item on the agenda. There may be, say, half a dozen things to talk about in the meeting. The great thing about a meeting like this is that they should be to the point, they should be brief, and all discussions should be short. Then at the very end, having discussed all of the business of the meeting, of the agenda, we then have a thing called AOB, any other business. And this is not an opportunity to raise big subjects. It's an opportunity to just raise small issues that may even need to be discussed at the next meeting. And the chairperson has the right really to be able to say, well, let's just defer that. Let's not talk about that just now, but let's make a note that we will talk about it at the next meeting. And then, of course, it's then important to set the time and the date and the place of the next meeting and the name of the person who's taking the minutes. And as a matter of practice, I always, at the end of a meeting, pull two people aside and say, can you just read over the notes and sign it to say that you're happy that this actually is a record of what was said during the meeting. So minutes are a very important thing, and if you're going to have any construction work on an ongoing basis, then you'll need to probably have a weekly meeting, at least one weekly meeting, to discuss all the issues around the building project. Now there's another form of documentation, which is the one that's just here, and that's called the memo. Now a memo is a written piece of paper, just a small piece of paper, and it's passed to somebody, or it's emailed to somebody, or maybe it's just a message on Messenger to somebody. It may say something like, hi Bill, just to let you know that the client will be joining us for a review meeting on site next Monday, Martin. So that's the memo, very brief. Sometimes it's just a sentence, okay? But there are other types of memos. For example, there may be notes. For example, you may need to send a memo to somebody to remind them about something that you've discovered. Let's suppose you're working in a workshop and you discovered something about the machinery is not correct. So you need to send a memo to the boss saying, look, there's something about this machine that's not correct. I think we need to look into it straight away. Occasionally, when I was working on a building site, I would have a little duplicate book. So I would write the memo, just a sentence in the duplicate book, and I would hand it tear the sheet off and hand it to the boss. And if he did nothing about it, or if he then swore blind at a later date that he never said it, and you never gave him a message, you can say, well, hang on a minute, I've got a copy. I've got a record. I've got a carbon copy of what was said. And this saves a lot of difficulty. You might, for example, have to send a memo saying, this is the amount of petrol I've been using and I need to be reimbursed for that. Or you might use it for some other purpose. Having a carbon copy of what you wrote is very important if that goes missing. So that's a very, very important thing. One of the last things that we've got on this particular thing is what's called an organisational chart. Now the organisational chart is a sort of a diagram. You can see it here. I haven't marked it all up, but this is a diagram, and there's the owner of the company, and there's the owner's secretary, and there's the owner's two managing directors, and then under the managing directors you've then got other people. And so what you have then is a pictorial diagram of all the people in the company and how they relate to one another. So if you're this person here and you've got a problem, you don't go over to this person over here. What you do, you go straight to this first person, your line manager they call it. So this is a line going through the company, and if this person isn't available, you go straight to the next line manager, and if these three are not available, you go straight to this line manager. So you don't just go straight from here to the boss, you go to your line manager, and that's what the purpose of an organisational chart is all about. Now there are a couple of other things that are on site. For example, we have what's called a site induction. Now the site induction is a very simple thing, and if you go to a new site and you've never been there before, then this will be a general introduction to the project and to all the staff involved, and also all the rules associated with the site. And very often nowadays, you wouldn't be able to go onto a site at all without having a site induction. And in the site induction, there will be a lot of information given to you. It might take a whole day, or it might take an hour or two to go through a site induction. They might even give you a little quiz at the end to see whether you have taken all the details on board. So first of all, there'll be a general introduction to the site, and they'll explain to you where you're to park your van or where you're to park your car. They'll explain to you what are the rules of the site, where you're allowed to be and where you're not allowed to be, what time you're allowed to come and what time you must leave, all those sort of things. They'll tell you when you are allowed to have your dinner break and when you're allowed to have a coffee break. All of these things are detailed. They will also tell you where the welfare facilities are, where the toilets are, where the showers are, where the drying room is, all the things that the employer has an obligation to provide. They'll tell you where there's clean drinking water. They'll tell you where you're allowed to put rubbish. They'll tell you what you're not allowed to do. They'll tell you what PPE you've got to wear. They'll tell you, you know what, it can be very, very comprehensive. And you need to really sit there and listen and take notes if you need to remember everything. They will tell you what you need to do in case of an accident. They'll tell you who are the first aiders. They will tell you what are the procedure if an accident occurs or even a near miss. They will tell you what the fire procedure is and where you're supposed to go if there is a fire, so that you can all be counted and recorded as being safe. There'll also be a notification of the daily hazards, such as working at height or moving vehicles. There'll also a notification about method statements, which are linked to the risk assessments. There'll be the site safety rules concerning drug or alcohol abuse or bullying or playing about, or all of the things that are not allowed to be done on site. And then also there will be other site-specific requirements. So in certain sites, you'll have to do certain things, and that'll be specified. It's no good you saying at a later date, well, we don't normally do that. Listen, they want you to do that here. So you need to know about all the quirks and all the interesting details of what the site is all about. Now the next thing on the list is what's called Toolbox talks, and traditionally these are talks that are given with a person standing next to a toolbox with his elbow on it, telling you all the information. And a toolbox talk, which we mentioned right at the very beginning of this course, is just a short presentation from the site manager or from the health and safety inspector, just telling you about things that are happening. He may say, for example, listen, today guys, we've got all the roof trusses coming. They're going to be coming in a big lorry, and when it comes, you'll hear it coming, you'll hear it backing in. You need to be very careful that you don't get in the way, and you need to be very careful out of the way of the crane, because the crane's going to be used to unload it. And so this is an information briefing, especially in relation to health and safety. They may even do it with PowerPoints on a computer. They may send you PDFs onto your phone. There's all sorts of ways in which that can be done. But the main thing is that Toolbox talks are very, very important, because they keep everybody up to date with what's happening on the site. And then the last thing I want to talk about is this last one here. It's called Defects Survey. Now, when I was a site manager, we always called it snagging. What are all the snags? And so I would have to go around with my notebook and say, oh, look, that little bit of architrave there's got a gap in it. We need to put a bit of glue in there and nail it up, make sure it's nice and tight. And that bit of skirt in there doesn't fit properly, so we'll send the carpenter back in and he can just alter that and make it look right. Or maybe there's a little bit of paint that's been missed, or maybe there's a door that's got a scuff mark on it, or a tiny little break on the woodwork. So these are all the little snags. These are all the little issues that can spoil a really, really good job. That's the point. So the snagging list, or the defect survey as they call it nowadays, the defect survey is designed to find all the little tiny little things. I mean, a classic example is when you don't put nails into wood properly and you don't fill the little hole. And what happens is, if the nail's on the surface, the paint won't necessarily stick to that nail. So after 2 or 3 days, the little bit of paint drops off and you end up with seeing the little head of the nail. It's a classic defect. It's easy to spot it. The customer will notice it immediately. Anybody that walks by will notice it immediately. And so these are little tiny defects. And it's not up to us to say, oh, it's only a little thing. No, it's a defect and it needs to just be corrected. It doesn't take generally any time at all, but it's something that needs to be done for the customer. That's the point. Well, there we are. That's the list of things that we're going to be talking about just for now. Next time we're going to talk about different types of communication. Okay, look forward to seeing you on that video. Bye for now.